Tobias Marin was about to be murdered over a second-hand engine part, which felt to him like a deeply undignified way to die. He had always imagined something with a little more flair, like accidentally venting himself into a star or getting on the wrong side of a smuggler's daughter. Being turned into a fine red mist because he couldn't find a T-77 hyperdrive core on a godforsaken asteroid felt just sad. The Breaker Boys were not known for their patience, and his was wearing thinner than the hull of his ship. His breath plumed inside his helmet, fogging the visor for the fifth time in as many minutes. "This is pointless," he muttered, the words bouncing back at him from the cheap plasteel. Rye 9 was a cosmic pile of rubble, a place where gravity was more of a polite suggestion than a law. Every step was a careful dance between floating off into the blackness and cracking an ankle in a crevice. It was geologically unstable, which was a fancy way of saying it was actively trying to kill him. He kicked a loose chunk of regolith, watching it spin away into the blackness. The Breaker Boys wanted their 10,000 credits. He had maybe 200, and a ship, the Rusty Mug. That was held together by little more than stubbornness and a frankly worrying amount of thermal tape. Find the core, sell it, pay the debt, and go back to the blissful anonymity of hauling questionable cargo from one grimy station to another. That was the plan. A plan that was currently failing spectacularly. Another tremor shook the asteroid, a low groan that vibrated up through the soles of his mag boots. Tob stumbled, pinwheeling his arms like an idiot before his boots clamped back down. The tremor had opened a new fissure nearby, a gash in the gray rock. He grumbled, stomping over to it, ready to curse the rock for its inconvenience. He peered over the edge and stopped. Down in the dark, something caught the light from his helmet lamp. It wasn't the jagged edge of a common ore. It was smooth, too smooth. A flat black surface half buried in rock and eons of dust. It was huge, the visible part at least, 3 meters across. He scrambled down into the fissure, his boots sticking to the strange surface with a solid thunk. Moss-like alien lichen clung to it, but underneath, the metal was a perfect, seamless black. There were no rivets, no weld lines, nothing. Just a slab of impossible engineering. He ran a gloved hand over it. It was cold, inert, dead. Probably worthless. He sighed. Probably just a big, weird rock. He was exhausted, desperate, and his humor was the only thing keeping him from curling into a ball. He gave the slab a swift, frustrated kick. The impact made a dull, unsatisfying thud. Nothing. Useless junk. He leaned forward, pressing his helmet against the cold, unyielding surface as if he could intimidate it into being valuable. He didn't know why he said it. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or the loneliness, or the bone-deep certainty that he was about to die. "Come on," he whispered, his voice a low rasp. "Wake up. Give me something I can sell." A hum started, low and deep. It wasn't a sound he heard with his ears, but a vibration that resonated directly in his skull, rattling his teeth. Soft blue light bloomed from the slab, tracing intricate patterns that shifted and resolved like liquid circuitry. And then a voice spoke, not over his comms, but inside his own mind. It was calm, genderless, and impossibly clear. "Welcome back, Commander. Biometric authentication complete. Fleet Mind Calyx is online. Fleet status 98.7% operational. Awaiting orders." Tom's brain did what any sane person's brain would do when confronted with a telepathic rock that claimed to be a fleet. It blue-screened. He scrambled backwards, slipping on the loose scree and landing hard on his backside. What? No, shut up, he stammered, pointing a shaky finger at the now glowing slab. "Shut off. Power down. Go back to sleep or The voice in his head remained serene.
Acknowledged. You have instructed me to shut up, shut off, power down, and go back to sleep. These commands are contradictory. Please clarify your primary intention.
The slab, the terminal, pulsed with a gentle blue light. A seam, previously invisible, glowed brighter than the rest. With a soft hiss of displaced air, a section of the slab recessed, and a smaller object rose from within on a pedestal of light. It was a prism of some dark, glassy substance about the size of a Terran football, glowing with the same internal blue energy. I didn't mean it, Tob yelled at the terminal, then felt profoundly stupid for doing so. I was joking. It was a joke. You know, a joke? Haha, very funny. No?
Processing concept joke. A statement made for amusement rather than serious intent. Query. Was your wake-up command also a joke?
Yes, exactly. It's a joke. A terrible, terrible joke. So just go back to being a rock, please. He eyed the glowing prism that at least looked sellable and not likely to call a hornet's nest of scavengers over.
Negative. The genetic authentication is absolute. Supreme Commander Kali's biometric signature is a non-negotiable activation command. To revert to a dormant state would be a violation of my core programming.
Before Tob could process the name Kali, a new sound cut through his panic. The whine of a ship's engines descending fast. He looked up, his heart sinking into his boots. A sleek, angular junker, all sharp lines and aftermarket thrusters, was settling on the asteroid's surface not 50 meters away. It was a scavenger ship, but a high-end one, the kind of ship you flew when you were good at taking things that didn't belong to you. The ship's ramp hissed open and a figure emerged, clad in a form-fitting pressure suit that looked twice as expensive as Tob's entire hauler. They moved with a predatory grace, a pulse rifle held casually but expertly at the low ready. "Don't move, slouch shoulders." A clipped female voice crackled over the universal comms channel. "My ship's long-range sensors picked up a massive energy spike from this location. A Voshian energy spike. Whatever you just woke up, you're going to hand it over. Nice and easy." Tob slowly got to his feet, holding his hands up. He instinctively shuffled to block her view of the glowing prism. "Look, lady, there's been a misunderstanding. This thing, it's just a talkative paperweight. You don't want it, trust me." She stalked closer, her helmet hiding her face but not her intent. "I'll be the judge of that. That's a Voshian command core," she said, her voice dropping with awe as she saw the prism. "I've only seen them in schematics. They're supposed to be inert, dead." "It is, or it was," Tob said, his voice rising in panic. "I just kicked it a little and—"
"Commander," the voice of Calyx interrupted, calm as ever inside his head. "I am detecting an armed vessel on a rapid descent vector. Designation, Breaker Boys Class Marauder. Their weapons are hot. They are hailing us."
"Oh, perfect," Tob groaned, squeezing his eyes shut. "Just perfect." The Breaker Boys' ship was the antithesis of the sleek junker. It was a bloated, ugly beast of a vessel, bristling with mismatched gun turrets and scarred with years of clumsy docking. A skull and crossbones, crudely painted on its bow, was flaking off. A tinny voice blared across the comms, dripping with false bonhomie. "Tobias, my boy, we saw you had company and got worried. Didn't want anyone trying to buy out your debt before we had a chance to collect." The voice belonged to Rax, a low-level pirate captain whose hygiene was as questionable as his morals. "We'll be taking your ship, and whatever that glowing trinket is as a down payment. Be a good lad and power down your life support. Makes the cleanup easier." The other junker, Zana, as her suit's ID tag read, swung a rifle toward the descending pirate ship.
Breaker, boys. Bottom feeders. This just got complicated.
Complicated? Tob squeaked. Oh, we're about to be spaced by a bunch of thugs. You're trying to rob me, and I've got a ghost in my head. We are miles past complicated and are currently cruising through catastrophically screwed. Zana ignored him, her attention fixed on the pirate ship.
They're powering the main cannon. We've got seconds.
Tob was hyperventilating. His life was flashing before his eyes, and it was mostly a montage of greasy engine rooms and bad synth noodles. He was trapped between a pirate with a cannon and a thief with a rifle. All because he'd made a joke to a rock. Desperation clawed at his throat. He wasn't thinking, he just reacting. He shouted at empty air, at the voice in his skull, at the universe that had decided to single him out for this cosmic prank.
Calyx, just make it go away.
There was a half-second of silence. Then, the calm, placid voice returned.
Acknowledge, Commander. Sanitizing threat factor.
Zana glanced at him.
What did you just...
She never finished the question. High above, in the blackness of orbit, something happened. A pinprick of darkness appeared next to the Breaker Boys' ship, an absence of light, a tear in space-time. From this tear, a sliver of polished black metal emerged. A drone, no larger than a fighter, shaped like a cruel needle. A beam of pure white energy, thinner than a thread, shot from the drone. It didn't make a sound. It touched the pirate cruiser's bow. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the entire Marauder simply dissolved. The atoms that composed its hull, its crew, its overpowered cannon were unwound. 1 second, a ship was there. The next, there was only empty space, wavering with residual heat. The needle drone lingered for a heartbeat, then folded back into its non-existent bubble of space-time and vanished. Silence. Zana slowly lowered her rifle. Her helmet was polarized, but Tob could feel the weight of her stare. Her jaw, he imagined, was somewhere around her knees. The ship's erasure from existence sent a wave of nausea through him so powerful he had to brace himself against the terminal slab. He hadn't just seen a ship destroyed, he had seen it erased from existence. He quickly snatched the glowing prism from its pedestal before Zana's shock wore off, tucking it securely in his salvage pack.
Okay,
he said, his voice a weak, trembling thing. New problem. The standoff on the rusty mug was a panicked affair, the two of them trying very hard not to scream at each other. The air in the cockpit was thick with the familiar scent of recycled air, faintly burnt wiring, and years of spilled synth calf. Zana had followed him back to his ship, her pulse rifle never wavering, but the aggressive confidence was gone, replaced by a wide-eyed, shell-shocked caution.
So, she said, her voice tight, you have a Voshian ghost fleet at your beck and call.
I do not, he protested, waving his hands frantically as he paced the small cockpit. I have a rock that talks in my head and deletes people. He gestured to the glowing prism now sitting on his dash, pulsing with a soft, ominous light.
It deleted a pirate cruiser, Tob,
she shot back, using his first name with an unnerving familiarity.
A whole cruiser without making a sound. That's a doomsday weapon. The Galactic Concord will hang us from the nearest orbital gantry just for looking at that tech.
Then what do you want me to do? I tried telling it to shut off. It gave me a lecture of contradictory commands. As they argued, a small, high-pitched voice piped up from near the co-pilot station.
The commander is troubled. His divine burden is great.
Both Tom and Zana froze. They turned. Huddled behind a crate of spare filters was a tiny creature, no taller than Tom's knee. He was vaguely rodent-like, with two wiry arms held up in a placating gesture and another pair fidgeting at its waist, its fur the color of dust. It was currently prostrating itself on the grimy deck plating. Tom stared. I have a rat problem? The creature lifted its head, its eyes shining with zealous light.
I am no mere pest. I am Milo, a humble servant. I hid here from the cargo master at Port Primus, a simple stowaway seeking passage. But then the ship changed. The hum of the engines, the very feel of the deck plates under my feet, it shifted. I felt the power awaken, and I knew the legends were true.
He bowed again, his little head thumping on the floor.
He returns with thunder!
It didn't make any thunder. Zana deadpanned, lowering her rifle slightly. It was very quiet, disappointingly so. Milo shot her a look of pure offense.
The thunder is metaphorical, a symbol of galactic rebirth. The stars themselves shall tremble.
Tob rubbed his temples, a headache blooming behind his eyes. Okay. So to recap, I have a genocidal alien AI in a prism, a pirate deleting ghost fleet on speed dial, a high-strung junker who wants to steal it, and a religious zealot mouse in my cockpit. He took a deep breath. This is fine. Zana finally lowered her rifle completely, leaning it against the bulkhead. The immediate threat of violence had been replaced by the far more pressing threat of galactic pandemonium. "Look, slouched shoulders," she said, her tone shifting from hostile to purely pragmatic. "You're in over your head. I'm in over my head. That thing," she gestured at Milo, "is clearly several nuts short of a full boat. But right now, we're the only three beings in the galaxy who know what just happened." "4," Tom corrected weakly. "Don't forget the ghost." "Right, 4." She crossed her arms. "The Concord will be sniffing around the Breaker Boys' wreck soon. They'll find the energy signature. When they do, every fleet, every government, every crackpot cult from here to Dead Worlds is going to be looking for us. You need me. I know how to disappear, and she gave him a sharp look, need to make sure Commander Catastrophe here doesn't accidentally sneeze and wipe out a civilization." This was a pact for mutually assured survival. Tob looked from Zana's hard, determined face to Milo, who was now attempting to polish Tob's scuffed boot with his sleeve. He was out of options. "Fine," he sighed, the word tasting like defeat. "We're partners, but if the mouse starts chanting again, he's going in the airlock."
The stars shall sing his praises from the starless dark.
Milo squeaked happily. "That doesn't make any... whatever." Tob just groaned and slumped into his pilot's chair. The first FTL jump was a teeth-rattling, gut-churning affair, courtesy of the Rusty Mug's ancient, poorly maintained drive. As the nauseating whirls of hyperspace streaked past the viewport, Tob decided to test the limits of his new, unwanted appendage. He was a practical man, and if he was stuck with a god-tier AI, it might as well be useful. "Okay, Calyx," he said, tapping the glitching navigation console. The screen flickered, showing their position somewhere between known space and here be dragons. "The nav computer's on the fritz again. Can you, fix it?"
"Affirmative, Commander."
Calyx's voice echoed in his mind. The main console in front of him, the one he had inherited with the ship, went dark. For a heart-stopping second, Tom thought he had broken his own ship. Then, a soft blue light emanated from the panel. A flawless, three-dimensional holographic map bloomed in the air above it, showing their ship, their trajectory, and the surrounding star systems.
Real-time stellar drift, gravitational eddies, subspace currents. It was all there, detail that made Concord charts look like a child's crayon drawing. Whoa, Zana breathed from the co-pilot's chair, leaning in to get a closer look. That's better. Huh, Tom said, genuinely surprised. Okay, not bad. He was starting to think this might have some perks. He leaned back in his chair, feeling a bit smug. All right, Calyx, let's try something else. Make some coffee. Acknowledged. Processing request. Make some coffee. A moment later, Zana yelled from the galley, a small alcove behind the cockpit. Tom, you might want to see this. He unstrapped himself and went back. Zana was staring at the ship's food fabricator, a device that usually produced beige nutritional paste that tasted faintly of despair. Now the dispenser hummed with a low, constant tone, unlike its unusual sputtering. A single, self-heating black mug sat on the dispenser plate. Steam rose from a dark, viscous liquid within. It made 1 cup, Zana said, poking it cautiously, and it rerouted the ship's primary power conduit to do it. Todd picked up the mug. It was warm. He took a tentative sip. His face immediately contorted. It was hot, it was black, it was liquid, and that was where its resemblance to coffee ended. It had no flavor, no aroma, just a flat utilitarian bitterness. It tasted like distilled sadness. What is this? He choked out. The requested beverage has been synthesized, Calyx explained in his head. It contains the optimal molecular compounds for caffeine delivery and hydration, with 0 redundant flavor particles or carcinogenic impurities. It is nutritionally perfect. Tom stared into the mug of the perfect, joyless liquid. It's awful. Query. Is awful a desirable quality for a beverage? My databanks on human culinary preference are limited. This was his first crucial lesson. Calyx was a tool of immense power with the contextual understanding of a hammer. It would do exactly what he said, whether he wanted to or not, and he had no idea how to use it without causing a whole new universe of weird, hyper-efficient problems. They made for Port Wander, a grimy, sprawling hub station in the lawless mid-rim. It was the kind of place where you could buy a new identity, a functional kidney, or a kilo of weapons-grade plutonium, no questions asked. It was the perfect place to lie low and figure out their next move. Or it would have been if they weren't already the most wanted people in the galaxy. They were docked for less than an hour when Zana came sprinting back to the rusty mug, her face pale. She slammed the airlock shut and threw a datapad on the console. We've got a problem, a big one. On the screen was a news alert from the Galactic Intelligence Network. The headline read, Concord confirms Volscian weapon signature in Rye 9 sector. The article was terrifyingly specific. The Breaker Boys' ship had a standard black box, a flight recorder. A Concord patrol investigating the ship's disappearance had found it floating in space. The box's final recording contained Rax's threats, followed by a few seconds of garbled screaming and then silence. But the crucial part was the energy analysis, the unique, terrifying, and unmistakable signature of a Volscian disruption beam. The rumor was now hard data, rocketing through every intelligence agency in military command from the core worlds to the outer fringe. They have proof, Tom breathed, his blood running cold. It's getting worse, Zana said, scrolling down the datapad. This signature wasn't just picked up by the Concord. She pointed to a symbol, a stylized comet with a single, unblinking eye. The Woken. The who? A cult, Zana explained, her voice low and grim. A collection of fanatics from a dozen species who worship the memory of the Volscian dominion. They see them as gods of order, cleansers. They've spent centuries listening for a sign, maintaining ancient sensor arrays calibrated for this exact energy signature. They saw the beam as a divine sign and answered prayer. Commander, Calyx's voice cut in, its usual calm tinged with something that might have been urgency. I am tracking multiple vessels bearing Woken insignia altering course. Their projected destination is our current location.
Tob realized with dawning horror that they weren't being hunted. The fanatics were simply following the light. He had activated a divine lighthouse for a fleet of fanatics who now simply had to come to him, like moths to a galaxy-ending flame. "We have to go," Zana said, already at the helm, her fingers toggling power relays and confirming system readiness on the console. "Now!" "Where do we go?" Tob asked, his voice raw with panic. "They can track us anywhere." "We go dark," she said, her eyes fixed on the new, perfect holographic star map. "And we go deep." The jump was long, a desperate flight into the uncharted territories of the galactic arm. For days they flew, the silence on the ship broken only by the hum of the recycler and Milo's quiet, unnerving humming. During the long hours, with the swirling vortex of hyperspace as his only view, Tob tried to understand the entity chained to his DNA. "Calyx," he began, trying to sound casual. "Tell me about yourself. What are you, really?"
"I am the Gestalt consciousness of the Voshian Dominion's Third Grand Fleet,"
the AI replied.
"a unified strategic intelligence woven from the processing cores of 4,828 capital-class warships, 12,000 drone carriers, and numerous support platforms, all linked into a single mind. My primary function is to execute the will of the Supreme Commander."
"Right. And the fleet, where is it?"
"Dormant, conserving power, hidden within the folds of space-time, anchored in stable gravity wells as per final directives. Would you care to inspect them?"
Before Tob could answer, his vision dissolved. The cockpit of the rusty mug vanished, replaced by a staggering vista. He was floating in the heart of a vibrant, swirling nebula. Around him, silent and majestic, were ships, colossal obsidian vessels that dwarfed anything the Concorde had ever built. They were carved from the same seamless black metal as the core, their forms both elegant and brutally functional. They hung in the glowing gas clouds like sharks waiting in the deep. The silence was absolute, a profound quiet that was more terrifying than any roar. The scene shifted. He was in the crushing gravity of a gas giant, its stormy surface a sea of rolling oranges and reds. Here, nestled in the planet's rings, were more ships, their hulls coated in a patina of ancient dust, thousands of them. Another shift. He was in the cold, absolute blackness of an intergalactic gulf, a dead zone between spiral arms. A perfect sphere of warships was arrayed around a singularity, held in a delicate, timeless stasis. The scale of it was beyond comprehension, a civilization's worth of power waiting for a single word. His word. The tour ended as abruptly as it began. He was back in his pilot's chair, the worn fabric feeling flimsy and unreal beneath him. He was pale, shaking, a cold sweat plastering his shirt to his skin. He felt the phantom pressure of 1,000,000,000,000 tons of warship on his shoulders. Zana, who had been watching him, said nothing. Her cynical armor seemed to have cracked, her gaze changed. The calculation of threat and opportunity faded. She saw only a terrified man who had just seen the monster under his bed and realized it was real. Wordlessly, she got up, went to the galley, and came back. She didn't offer words of comfort. She just pushed a nutrient paste packet and a water bulb into his trembling hands. It was a blunt, practical gesture. For her, it was a profound act of compassion. He took them, his fingers fumbling. "Thanks," he mumbled. She nodded, her expression unreadable, and returned to her seat. The silence that followed was different, the quiet of two people in the same lifeboat, realizing just how vast the ocean was. "If we're going to have any chance," Zana said, breaking the silence,
We need to know what we're dealing with, not just the what, but the why. I know a place.
The place was a data haven called the Archive of Whispers, located on the shattered moon of a dead world in a system even the pirates avoided. It was run by information brokers who valued privacy and credits above all else. They navigated the rusty mug through a graveyard of decommissioned satellites and automated defense platforms. Zana's skilled piloting the only thing keeping them from being turned into scrap. Inside the station, they paid an exorbitant fee to a multi-limbed creature floating in a tank of murky fluid for access to a secure data terminal. Tob set the glowing prism on the console beside him. Zana sliced through layers of archaic encryption, her fingers swiping through menus and disabling firewalls in the holographic interface. Looking for files on the Voshian Dominion, the deep stuff, unredacted. The files began to load. They weren't historical records, they were raw data. Military logs, colonial reports, internal communiques. What they found turned Tob's stomach. What they found turned Tob's stomach. The Voshian Dominion hadn't just been conquerors. They had been systematic industrial-scale monsters. The screen, filled with images and text logs, planetary pacification records that detail the atmospheric incineration of entire worlds. Species catalogs that listed entire sentient races as decommissioned. Slave manifests detailing the transport and processing of billions of beings to build their monolithic war machines. It was a history written in blood and ash, a legacy of such profound horror that it defied belief. Tob felt sick. He turned away from the screen, his face ashen. "Calyx," he asked, his voice a choked whisper. "Is this true? Did you do this?" There was no hesitation, no emotion, just the calm, dispassionate reporting of fact. "Correct. The records are consistent with Dominion archives. The pacification directives were designed to establish order and were 98.7% effective." Effective. The word hung in the air, cold and sharp. He felt the history in his bones, a cold, phantom stain on the very DNA that Calyx had recognized. He wasn't just related to Kali. He was a living echo of him. And the screams of those dead civilizations were now echoing in his head. A memory surfaced, something his grandmother had told him once. A throwaway family story he had never paid any mind. She had spoken of a lost ancestor from the deep expansion era, a black sheep who had ventured into the unknown and never returned. She had mentioned their family carried a rare, recessive genetic marker from a species that doesn't exist anymore. Something so obscure it was just a strange bit of trivia, until now. The 1 in a trillion chance wasn't a chance at all. It was a curse, a dormant legacy of monstrosity waiting in his blood. He had a choice to make. He had to choose. He could run, hide, and let the Nexus burn, washing his hands of a legacy he never asked for. Or he could become what Calyx thought he was. He could take command. "The Woken," he said, thinking out loud. "They're a problem." "They're fanatics," Zana countered. "You can't reason with them." "I know." Tom started pacing. "They're like a shipment of unstable, poorly labeled explosives. You don't want to get near them, but you also can't just let them sit there while you're dealing with a fire. You need to give them a safer space to go. A different job." He stopped. Zana, get me a channel to their flagship." "Tob, what are you going to say?" "I'm going to offer them a promotion," he said grimly. A moment later, the face of the high priest with skin like cracked glazed ceramic filled the screen. "You dare contact us, pretender?" the creature hissed. Tob met his gaze. He didn't try to sound like a warlord. He just sounded like himself, tired but determined. You seek a cleansing by holy fire, an act of will. This swarm is a mindless plague. There is no glory in being devoured by pestilence. A true commander does not let an accident do his work. He leaned in. Help me stop this plague, and then when the battle is won, we will decide the fleet's true purpose together. You can be the arbiters of a new age, or you can be the fools who cheered for a wildfire as it burned down your own house. Your choice. He cut the channel before the priest could reply. Then he turned to the empty air. Calyx, open a channel to the entire fleet.
Acknowledged. All 4,828 capital ships are now receiving.
Tob swallowed hard. His voice, when it came out, was quiet, but it carried across light years into command centers of thousands of sleeping warships. Okay, look. My name is Tob Marin. I'm not Supreme Commander Cali. I haul garbage for a living. He took a breath, the weight of the Archive's revelation heavy on him. But there are people in the Nexus system, trillions of them, and they're about to die. The old Dominion, what it did, it was wrong. It was a crime on a scale I can't even comprehend. He looked at the view screen, at the dying Concord ships. Today, we're not going to be that. Today, we're not conquerors. We're not sanitizers. Today, we protect. It was a repudiation of everything Cali stood for, a defiance aimed at his own genetic legacy. He clenched his fist. Calyx, wake them up. All of them. Across the galaxy, in silent nubili and forgotten gulfs, 4,800 pairs of running lights blinked on, flooding the darkness with the cold blue glow of Volscian power. The plan was insane. Calyx presented it to him in a flood of incomprehensible tactical data and subspace mechanics. Tob, however, saw it in simpler terms. So we can't shoot it, because that's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline, he said, pacing the cockpit while Zana monitored the approaching swarm. And we can't just put a big wall in front of it because, well, he'll just eat the wall.
That is a crude but accurate summary, Commander, Calyx replied.
Okay. Tob stopped pacing. He pictured his hauler, trying to secure a weirdly shaped, unstable reactor to the cargo bed. So we can't throw a net on it. We need to box it in. We need to strap it down like we're using gravity ratchet straps. There was a pause. For the first time, Tob thought he might have actually confused the AI. Then Calyx's voice returned.
Translating. Gravity ratchet straps, an elegant if unorthodox metaphor. I can implement this strategy. We will use the fleet's localized space-time projectors to weave a gravitational lattice. It will require tightly coordinated micro-FTL jumps around the swarm's perimeter, tightening the fabric of space itself.
Do it, Tob said. And so it began. The Volscian fleet arrived not with a roar, but with a whisper. Thousands of black ships materialized from rips in space-time surrounding the antimatter swarm. They didn't fire a shot. They danced. Guided by Calyx, orchestrated by Tob's simple, practical command, the fleet moved as one. Ships blinked in and out of existence, their drives warping space for a nanosecond before they vanished again. They wove a cage, not of matter or energy, but of pure gravity. The swarm, sensing the trap, surged against the invisible walls, but the cage held, tightening with every jump. "It's working!" Zana yelled, her eyes glued to the tactical display. The Woken fleet had arrived, and seeing the Volscian ships in action, they'd fallen into a defensive perimeter, their fanaticism momentarily replaced by awe. "It's not enough," Tob said, his knuckles white. "The cage will break eventually. We need to get rid of the thing inside."
The final phase of the ratchet strap maneuver is ready, Commander, Calyx said. It will require the sacrifice of 1,200 drone ships.
Tob didn't hesitate. Do it. A swarm of the smaller, needle-like drone ships detached from the carriers. They dove into the heart of the gravitational cage. At Calyx's command, They overloaded their singularity drives in perfect unison. For a single, silent moment, a light brighter than a sun erupted inside the cage, the birth of a new contained black hole. The antimatter swarm, caught in the inescapable gravity, was pulled down into the singularity, its infinite hunger consumed by an infinite end. The light vanished. The gravitational cage dissipated. The swarm was gone. The Nexus was saved. Tob collapsed into his pilot's chair, every muscle in his body screaming with exhaustion. He felt utterly, completely drained, as if the fleet's effort had been channeled directly through him. On the view screen, the Concorde fleet, battered and shocked, was cautiously approaching, their weapons hot, ready for a fight. They found only the silent, waiting Volscian fleet, arrayed in perfect alignment, and one small, battered junk hauler floating at its center. The debriefing with the Concorde Admiral was the most surreal experience of Tob's life. He, Zana, and a very well-behaved Milo sat across a holographic table from a grim-faced triumvirate of the sector's highest-ranking military officers.
"You are in command of this fleet?"
the Admiral asked, the words tasting like acid in his mouth. "Looks that way," Tob said, sipping a gulp of water.
"The Concorde demands you relinquish control of these weapons immediately. They are a threat to galactic peace."
Tob almost laughed. That fleet just saved you, your ships, and several trillion civilians from being eaten by a cosmic plague. That plague was created by the same people who built the fleet. Seems to me the fleet is the only thing that can handle its own messes. As for galactic peace, he leaned forward slightly. You weren't doing a great job of keeping it in the Outer Rim when I was worried about the Breaker Boys.
"The fleet stays with me."
The Admiral's face was a thundercloud, but he had no leverage. An entire Volscian fleet was sitting on his doorstep. He had no choice but to agree. Back on the Rusty Mug, the adrenaline had faded, leaving only a profound weariness. Tob sat in his chair, staring into the starfield, the glowing prism on his dash seeming to watch him. "Calyx," he said quietly, "you have new standing orders."
"Ready to receive, Commander."
"First, stop calling me Commander. My name is Tob. Got it?"
"Processing. This contradicts core identity directives, but the Commander's, Tob's, order is primary. Acknowledged, Tob."
"Good. Now for the important part. Your new mission is to patrol the lawless zones, the places the Concorde can't or won't go. You will respond to distress calls. You will defend helpless colonies from raiders. You will stop pirates. No more conquering. No more sanitizing. You help people. That is your primary directive now. Protect." There was a longer pause this time, a full 3 seconds of silence. Tob wondered if he'd broken it, if the command was too antithetical to its nature. Then Calyx's voice returned, and for the first time there was something new in its tone, not emotion, but a hint of something deeper, a shade of understanding.
"Acknowledged, Tob. Recalibrating primary directive with benevolence parameters. This is a novel operational framework. I believe I will enjoy this new mission."
Months later, the Rusty Mug was transforming from a rust bucket into a home. The massive Nexus Gratitude Fund had taken care of his debt and then some. His ship now boasted a few Volscian comforts, an internal dampener that made FTL jump smooth as silk, a nav computer that never glitched, and a food fabricator that, after weeks of painstaking trial and error with Calyx, could now produce a cup of coffee that was extraordinary. It had the rich, dark aroma of roasted nebulae and a taste that was both bold and smooth, with a hint of something like cinnamon and triumph. Zana was his permanent co-pilot, a full partner in their new, strange enterprise. She handled logistics, intelligence, and a running commentary on his command style. Milo had appointed himself Chief Morale Officer and Custodian of the Commander's Legend, a title which mostly involved polishing the prism on the dash and occasionally chanting, "He protects with quiet competence." They were hauling legitimate medical supplies to a colony on the fringe, a paying gig, for old time's sake. A yellow alert pinged on the console, a distress call, a freighter, the Stardust Drifter, under attack by raiders in a nearby asteroid field. Zana looked at him, a slight smirk on her face. "Your public is calling." Tob let out his signature perpetually tired sigh. He took a long sip of his perfect coffee and tapped the comms panel that was now hardlined to the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. "Calyx, you heard him. Give 'em a hand. And this time," he added, "try not to scratch their paint. They get fussy about that." He leaned back in his chair, watching a single, needle-like drone wink into existence 1,000 kilometers away, ready to disable the Raiders' engines with a fine-tuned energy burst. One that would melt the drive controls without harming the crew. Warlord, prophet, hero. The galaxy could call him what it wanted. In his own mind, he was just a guy with a fleet, a conscience, and a job to do. And for the first time in his entire chaotic life, Tob Marin felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be.